YouTube, this is Darkon633. We're going to take a look at another Power Rangers toy review. This time we're going to take a look at the first wave of the Power Rangers Ninja Steel 5-inch action figures, along with a revision wave which is technically only available in several stores. It seems like ever since the early Saban Era, well at least the Neo Saban Era, a lot of these figures have been bouncing around via different stores, and once again it looks like an entire set of different figures were sent through different stores. Most of the Targets already, and some Walmarts, have already received major assortments of the main 5 Rangers, but that assortment really only contains the 5 Rangers. It seems as though the Toys R Us assortment, and maybe also Walmart, but I'm not 100% sure on that, also received a set of villains. Obviously, these are still one per case regardless, but it's still interesting to see that we have a huge variety of characters already in the first wave, including one that is considered possibly one of the main villains, even though he kind of bounces back and forth between maybe like a full-on main villain kind of character. Doesn't seem as prominent as some of the other main villains already featured on the show, but he is still technically a main villain. We also got a Day of monster, which is Ripperat, and we also got the standard Basher. So it's pretty cool that we got so far, and now we're just going to quickly look at all the figures we have in the first wave. To start off, we're going to take a look at the main 5 Rangers first. We're just going to quickly run through the boxes. The boxes are pretty much the same we've seen with all the Rangers here, but on the back it just shows a picture of each of the Rangers, shows that it can't pilot the Megazord, and pretty much what we see in the first assortment. So we're just going to quickly look through all the boxes. There isn't a whole lot of different you're going to get otherwise. It's still in the same collector-friendly style box where you can actually cut the sides here via the 3 little tabs on the sides of each of the plastic, and it's easily openable without it completely messing up the card. So it's nice that Bandai America is continuing with that trend in the way that they design the packages for those who wanted to keep the box. So here's the Blue Ranger. Here's the Pink Ranger. And then, finally, here is the White Rangers box. So that's pretty cool. Well, now we're going to take a look at each of the figures. The male bodies all maintain the same articulation, and the female bodies maintain the same articulation between the two. So first, we're going to take a look at Brody, the Red Ranger. So we got pretty decent articulation. The head can swivel 360. It does have ratchet ball joints actually on the shoulders, and I find that very interesting since a lot of the previous seasons of Power Rangers toys only had the standard ball joints, so it's nice that we have a much better joint on the figures this time around. It does still maintain the single elbows, and it does swivel at the wrists. Unfortunately for mine is a bit defective for my Red Ranger, since the hand has a tendency to kind of pop off. When I took it out of the box, it seems like it was going through some major QC issues, and it already popped off once. And I find it very annoying that my Red Ranger has a lot of problems. None of the other Rangers I have this issue, so it's kind of weird that just the Red Ranger has it. But otherwise, he still maintains the same hip joints, but they're very tight there. And the same single knees. And it also has a boot swivel. So it does have a lot of articulation. The paint's also pretty well done throughout the figure, and besides the fact that the white stripe is missing on the back, unlike previous seasons, there isn't a whole lot of details missing in terms of paint in general in the back design, so it's nice that we actually have a pretty consistent figure overall. Unfortunately, it seems to be the cost of that, since each figure only includes one accessory, and that is their main sword, which, for those who are watching the Japanese show, knows that this is the actual morpher or changer that they used in there. However, in America, we did use the Karakuri Hengen as the actual morpher, which is sad to see that none of the Rangers actually include. So that pretty much covers the Red Ranger in terms of a figure. Next, we're going to take a look at the Yellow Ranger. Articulation-wise, it's the exact same thing, but we're just going to quickly run through them. So we got the swivel there, the same ratchet joints at the shoulders, the same elbows. I forgot to mention they do actually have a wrist swivel up there as well as the hand too, so that's really nice that they have that. They have the same joints of the hips, same joints of the knees, and same swivels at the boot. So they still have a lot of articulation overall. Next, we're going to take a look at the Blue Ranger. which once again will have the exact same thing we've seen with the other two. These figures are actually, while they're close to the Japanese releases that they released during Ninja's run, these are actually slightly different. So overall, it's kind of looks like the one they released in Japan, but it is technically a different mold. It does have the same joints at the shoulders, same swivels, both at the upper arm and the wrist, same joints at the hips, same joints at the knees, and same swivels. So that pretty much covers for the male sculpts of the main Rangers here. And now we're going to take a look at the articulation points for the female sculpts. What's cool is that they decided to release the figures with slits on the actual skirt pieces. So now you actually have a much wider movement in the hips, so that's really nice. Other points of articulation, the head does maintain the same swivel. It unfortunately does not have the ratchets as seen with the males, but they're still pretty decent and they work for what they need to do. They still have the same elbows, the same swivels, same thing with the wrists, same joints of the hips, same knee joints, and the same boot cut. They also include the swords like the males, but unfortunately for both the white and pink Rangers, for some reason they tend to fall out. I think it's because of the design, once again, of the smaller wrists, but it does what it needs to do overall. So we're just going to take the sword out to the side since it's going to fall anyway. And now, finally, we're going to take a look at the White Ranger. The White Ranger also maintains the same articulation as the Pink Ranger. Same joints of the shoulders, same swivels, same hip joints, same knee joints, and same boot cuts. So overall, they still maintain a very similar points of articulation, and I think they did a very nice job in designing these figures, regardless of the fact they are missing quite a bit of accessories. Now we're going to take a look at the three villains released within the first wave of the toy line. And now we're moving on to the three villains. We're going to quickly look at their boxes, and since they are the villains of the series, they're obviously not going to have the same kind of looks in the back like the Rangers. However, while it says it can power the Megazord, I'm pretty sure these villain figures aren't going to be as compatible as the Ranger figures are, so just keep that in mind. Same thing with Ripperat here. And then finally, the grunt of the series, the Bashers. So that's pretty cool. Now we're going to take a look at the figures more specifically. First, we're going to take a look at Ripcon, also known as Gabi Raizou in Ninja. And unfortunately, unlike the Rangers, he was not as lucky with the paint schemes like we've seen with the other figures. Obviously, this isn't anything new since the villains tend to get less treatment compared to the Rangers, but it is sad to see a lot of the paint design missing on the figure. To be honest, I can live with that, except it is sad for me that the sheets were not designed on the figure, or at least included with it, so that it can clip on somewhere and so on, since while he does have the swords out quite a bit, he also sheathed them on the side of his hip, and it's sad that we do not have that whatsoever. It is still nice that both of his swords were included, at least. Articulation-wise, the head can move just a little bit left and right, but it is quite restricted due to how the head sculpt is in general. He has the ratchet joints at the shoulder, so that's nice that the villains actually have that here. A single elbow joint. No other articulation point there, neither at the upper arm or at the wrist, unfortunately. He has the same hip joints, but unfortunately my Ripcon's hips is kind of loose, so it's not the best that I've gotten compared to the Rangers. And he does have these single knee joints, but that's about it in terms of articulation, though, unfortunately. Now we're going to take a look at Ripperat, which looks cool, but got hit a little bit worse with the paint problems. Unlike Ripcon, which actually has still a pretty decent amount of paint overall, Ripperat pretty much has nothing. The tail isn't even painted, the body is still missing a ton of detailing in paint, and just about the figure itself, while it looks like the character and the monster, paint-wise, it's just really not there. Articulation, the head is static, can't do anything. He has the same kind of ratchet-like joints at the shoulders, but unfortunately, due to the shoulder pads and the way that the entire body is designed, you're not going to get a whole lot of articulation there, but it does have a little bit more movement, just moving forward and back. He has a little bit of swivel, but I think that's just because it's the type of plastic it has, really, than an actual articulation point. He has outward movement in the hips and single knee joints. So that's about it, what you're going to get with this particular figure. Now we're going to take a look at the grunts of the series, the Basher. I think the Basher turned out one of the best out of all of them. Most of the overall paint is intact, and while it's still missing a few paint schemes here and there, the overall design is pretty intact. One thing to notice is that the blue paint on the head kind of stops, which is a bit annoying, but if you're just going to display it in front, it looks pretty decent. The sword is missing paint, and unfortunately it is made of that gummy plastic. The swords and all the weapons are like that, but this one turned out kind of really bad in terms of the way that it was just packaged. But overall, I think it's okay. The head can swivel 360. It's got somewhat weaker ratchets, but it is there in the shoulders. Single joints at the elbows, but no other articulation point there, or neither in the actual wrists. It's got ratcheted hips, which is very interesting that the grunts have at this time. He has a single knee joint, and that's about it in terms of articulation. So overall, the sculpts of the actual villains are pretty well done. The articulation is a little lackluster, but it's nowhere near as bad as I've seen with a lot of previous villain figures, so I think Bandai America did a decent job with them overall. In conclusion, while the figures do maintain the standard Bandai America kind of limitations in terms of just basic kit line figures, I think Bandai America did a fantastic job with the overall sculpts and designs within all the figures within Wave 1. The villains are definitely lackluster, but they're still pretty good, especially with modern figure standards that Bandai America's been releasing, and I think they're definitely a fantastic release to have in your collection, especially if you're probably a fan of custom painting. They'll look a lot better with a whole new paint scheme added to them. I got these figures via various stores. I actually got Ripperat and Basher online on Toysus.com since I wasn't able to find them at stores at the time. I got Ripcon in store in person, and the 5 Rangers all at Target. So it did take a little bit of energy to look around, but I think they did a fantastic job in the overall releasing of the figures in general, and I can't wait to see what's in store in the future. By the time this video has been uploaded, a couple episodes of the series has already aired, and I think the show has started with a pretty fantastic start. Hopefully we'll see a lot of cool scenes and a lot more interesting storylines within the series up by the time we go into the hiatus time. Obviously, there wasn't a whole lot you can do within like 6 episodes before they usually do their typical hiatus time. But I think they did a good job so far within the first couple of episodes seen so far, and I cannot wait to see what's in store soon. Anyways, please comment, subscribe, and check out Hero Club and Hero Taku. Also check me on Twitter, Darkon633, and don't forget to check down the other channels down below. Please check the little bell at the bottom of the screen in order to see my content go up as soon as possible. I'm back with more Power Rangers reviews and more, but for now, I'll be seeing you later, YouTube. Bye.